Well, hello everybody. Thank you for dropping in and welcome to another episode. And today I'm going to be asking the question, if I could only use one lens, which one would it be? So today I'm going to try a little thought experiment. If I could only shoot one lens, which one would it be? I thought it might be an interesting exercise to find out. Why would I only want to shoot one lens? Well, I think really because limitations foster and encourage creativity. They encourage you to think your way around problems and find solutions using just the gear that you've got. Too much gear can mean too much choice, and we can end up being too busy thinking about the gear and not thinking enough about the actual photography. Now, I've found when I've been out shooting with whatever lens and camera combination that I've got, I've found that my photography adapts to the equipment that I've got at that point, at that time. And I'd never been out shooting and thought, I wish I'd brought such and such a lens with me. I just adapt to the gear that I've got. So with that in mind, I thought it might be an interesting exercise to consider which lens I would keep from my collection if I wanted only to use one. Now, I'm not going to look at every lens that I've ever shot. So I've drawn up a little bit of a short list, and there's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, a lot anyway. There's a lot on the short list because there's a lot of lenses that I like. So without further ado, let's take a look at those lenses and let's see which one I would keep out of them. So these are the lenses on my short list. Firstly, could it be the lens I'm going to use, the only lens I'm going to use? Could it be this one, the Helios 44? This is a lens that I've used and used and used. It's made several appearances on this channel. It's now being used by major feature film cinematographers, as we looked at last week, and it's a very, very, very beautiful lens. It has a 58mm focal length, so it has some reach, and that is quite important for me. I like a lens with a little more reach than maybe a 50 can give. I do like my lenses to be a little bit long, so could it be this one? Well, it has beautiful blur. It focuses down to 50 centimeters, I believe. Yes, 50 centimeters. Which is reasonably close focal distance, focus distance. So this is such a beautiful lens that it could be this one. This one is a maybe. This one is on the maybe list. So we'll keep that just sitting over there. Next on the list, we've got another lens that I've used and is one of my favorite lenses. This is the Zeiss Pancolar f1.8 50mm. This is one of the later versions, the non-radioactive versions. As I understand it, the earlier Zebra versions were radioactive. They both give phenomenal images. There is nothing quite like images from a Pancolar. So this is a beautiful, beautiful lens. Like a lot of the Zeiss lenses, it has a very close focus distance of 35 centimeters. So that really stands it in its favor. I do like a lens with a close focus distance rather. So this one also is on the maybe list. We'll put this one here. Perhaps that's the one I'm going to use. Next on the list, we've got this lovely little thing. It's a delightful little lens. This is the Jupiter 8 from KMZ. It's one of the FSU, former Soviet lenses. These were made in their millions and millions and millions. I've got silver bodied versions. This is a black body version, and they're all equally nice in their optical characteristics. This is a direct copy of a Zeiss Sonar lens designed in the 1930s. So this is an exact copy of a beautiful old vintage lens, and this in itself is a beautiful old vintage lens. So could this be the lens that I'm going to use, my only single lens that I would use if I could use only one? And the answer is no, it isn't. Why? Because it's a rangefinder lens, and its closest focusing distance is 1 meter or 3 feet. They can be adapted to focus to 0.7 meters, but that's a bit of a faff. We're looking at the lenses as they stand, so this one is not on the maybe pile or list for that reason. The Industar 22 is a beautiful little collapsible lens. Again, another FSU lens. I love this lens. It's collapsible, as I say. Don't collapse it on your digital cameras because it will hit the sensor. But it's a very, very nice little thing. It looks exceedingly cool. It's a very beautiful little thing, all chromium plated and silver and wonderful. Would this be the lens that I would use if I could use only one? Well, the answer is no, and that's for a similar reason to the Jupiter 8, in that it's a rangefinder lens and its closest focus distance is 3 feet or 1 meter. In addition to that, it's an f3.5, so I do also like to make a little bit of blur when I want to, and this is not the lens for making large quantities of blur. If you wanted, it will make some background blur, of course, but as an f3.5 lens, it doesn't make much. So this is for those two reasons, focus distance and the fact that it's an f3.5. That's a no. Similarly, the Industar 61 lens. This is a lens which I've used and used and used. In fact, this was my only lens for many years when I was learning photography back in the 1970s. It's a very nice lens. It's a Tessar design, just like the Industar 22 we just looked at, so it's inherently sharp. This one is f2.8 maximum aperture, so it's a little bit faster than the Industar 22, but it's not as fast as the Jupiter 8. It's a nice looking lens, and it's a very cheap lens, and it gives sort of pastel-y type colours. But this is not on the maybe pile because it's a rangefinder lens and it only focuses to 3 feet or 1 meter, and it's the same story for, or a similar story anyway, for this lens, which is sitting on my Leica 3 here. This is the Leica Summitar 50mm f2. Now this is a very, very beautiful lens. It's a beautiful looking lens. It's a beautifully made lens, and it also makes very, very beautiful images. It's f2, so it's faster than the Industar 61 and the Industar 22. It's as fast as the Jupiter 8, and in the final analysis it's a slightly nicer lens than the Jupiter 8 because it does give rather nicer blur. The Jupiter can be a little bit harsh in places. It's not always harsh by any means, but it does have a couple of harsh spots, and there are less of those in this lens. This is a very, very beautiful lens indeed. Plus it has a little swirl. It's got a little swirl going on in the background blur, where the bubbles in the background from point light sources towards the edges of the shot, and the corners become elliptical rather than circular, so you get this sort of swirling, energetic effect of motion. So I do like a little bit of swirl. So this lens, despite it focusing only down to 3 feet, this lens is so nice that it's on the maybe. So this might be the lens that I would use if I could only use one. Okay, what's next? Well, next we've got the Olympus 100 f2.8, which is sitting on my OM2 here. Now this is no it's not, it's sitting on my OM30. This is a very, very beautiful lens. It's 100mm, so it's got some reach, and that's a really nice thing. I do like a little bit of reach in my photography. I often find 50mm to be a little bit short, so this one has some good length. Minimum focus distance is 1 meter or 3 feet, but when you have a long lens like this, that is entirely sufficient. Maximum aperture is f2.8, so this is not quite as fast as I would want. And I think in the final analysis, 100mm is a little bit too long for the kind of photography that I do. So for those two reasons, the fact that it's a little bit too long and it's not quite as fast as I'd want it to be at f2.8, this lens is not on the maybe pile. Next we've got the Olympus 50 1.8, which is sitting here on my OM2 SP. This is one of the made in Japan versions, which are said to be better than all of the rest of the production run of these lenses, and having tested it against an older version of this lens, I can say that that is true. This is a very, very beautiful lens, very, very nice. It's very small on the camera. It's a very tiny little thing. Olympus lenses are known for being small. It's f1.8, so it's got a reasonable aperture opening. It's reasonably fast, and the minimum focus distance is 45 centimeters. However, despite the beauty of the images this lens produces, the background blur is not the nicest. It can turn harsh, and I guess relatively often it does turn harsh. You can't really be guaranteed of nice smooth blur with this lens, and when it does turn harsh, it's not a particularly pleasant kind of harshness. It's a little bit too harsh for what I would want. So for that reason, and the fact that it's not particularly fast, this lens is not one of the maybes. So that is not a lens that I would shoot or that I would want to shoot if I could only shoot one lens. I'm sure it would be entirely adequate, as all of these lenses would be, but I'm trying to find the lens that best suits my photography, and this one is not it. Okay, here's another lens. This is the Olympus 55mm f1.2, and this is one of the wide open anyway, one of the maddest lenses I've ever encountered. It's very, very soft, wide open, and background blur is quite considerable, especially if you go close. This will make astonishing amounts of background blur. It's not always particularly well behaved. However, this lens does change its character if you stop it down even to f2 and even more to f2.8. It becomes very, very sharp indeed, and the background blur tightens up to something that still does give one or two harsh spots, but is rather better behaved. And the benefit with this lens is you've got that f1.2 setting for if you want to do some sort of wacky shot, some sort of shot where you really want to foreground the behavior of the lens, or if you want to do a portrait. This lens does actually make nice portraits. It's a 55mm, so it's got that little bit of extra reach, and it's also quite a small-ish lens for its aperture opening of f1.2. It's relatively small, it's not particularly heavy, and you know, this lens strikes me as one that may well be the one that I would choose to shoot with if I could only shoot one lens. So this one goes onto the maybe pile. Okay, next we have this wonderful old lens. This is the Minolta PF, Auto Rocco PF, f1.4 58mm. So this is an early f1.4 lens. It dates from, I think, the early 60s or the mid 60s sometime, and it dates from a time when manufacturers weren't easily able to accommodate an f1.4 aperture opening within a 50mm lens. So lenses, f1.4 lenses from that period tend to be a little longer, 57s or 58s. This lens has incredible colour. Wide open, it's a little soft. Background blur is enormous, and it does smarten its act up very, very quickly if you stop it down to f2, and you do still get the benefit of those incredible Minolta colours. It is a radioactive lens, and that's perhaps why it gives such nice colours. So this lens is on the maybe pile. It's pretty fast, it's got plenty of reach, and it's got plenty of character wide open, so we're going to put that one on the maybe pile. As for other 1.4s, f1.4 50 or 50 odd mils, I've said no to the Olympus f1.4 because it's a 50mm and the blur can turn a little harsh now and again. It's a pretty sharp lens actually, wide open, and it does sharpen up very much if you stop it down. But because of its 50mm focal length, I've decided that I'm going to say no to that. The same with this Konica 50mm f1.4. It is a lovely lens, but it's 50mm and it's a little short, so that goes onto the no pile, as does the Konica f 1.4 57mm. This is the earlier version of the Konica lens. It's very soft, wide open, and it is subject to stray light catching the front element wide open. So optically, I don't think this is the finest lens. It really does smarten up once you stop it down, but wide open, it's not going to give you as interesting an image as the Olympus 55 1.2 or the Minolta 58 1.4. So for that reason, this lens too goes onto the no pile. The Canon 51.4. This is a lovely, lovely lens. It's one of the nicest f1.4s I've shot. The rendering is a little more modern than many of the other vintage f1.4s because this is a very late lens from the mid-80s, early 80s to mid-80s sometime. Minimum focus distance is 45 centimeters, so that's nice. But I am going to say no to this one because its rendering is a little too modern and it's a 50mm and I would like a little bit of extra reach. So I'm going to put that one onto the no pile also. Now I put some 135mm lenses on the short list. This Olympus 135 f3.5. This is a beautiful lens. It's got plenty of reach. It's a nice small lens. It's got a nice little hood that comes out to shade it from the sun because it can catch the light very, very easily. This is a beautiful lens that I've used many, many times. Its f3.5 aperture doesn't bother me too much because it's so long that it can make plenty of blur anyway. But I've not put this one on the maybe pile. Why? Because at 135mm, it's just too long for an only lens. It's just got too much reach for an only lens, and it's limited to certain situations. It's very, very good at certain situations, but not so good at others. And you may find that you're just too near, the lens is just too long, and for that reason I've rejected it. And in fact all the other 135s also that I've put on the list, one of them was this beautiful Helios, which was a massive surprise to me, the f2.8 135mm Helios. This is a really, really nice lens. It's an absolute hidden gem of a lens. And it makes beautiful images, but again at 135 it's too long for an only lens. I've rejected the Konica 135 f3.2 for the same reason. Also this beautiful Jupiter 11 135mm f4. This is a rangefinder lens. This one dates from 1974. I believe it's a sonar design. It's a very, very old design, essentially a 1930s lens, but it does make some very beautiful images. However, it is rather long. Its minimum focus distance is 2.5 meters, which is not terribly close, even for with a 135 lens. And its maximum aperture of f4 is not particularly fast. So for all those reasons, although this is a lovely, lovely lens, this one goes on the no pile. Right, there's only two more to go, and they're the Flectagons. One is the Carl Zeiss Flectagon 35mm f2.4, a very, very beautiful lens that I've sung the praises of more than once on this channel. Minimum focus distance of 20 centimeters, so it's a very, very versatile lens. A lot of the Carl Zeiss lenses focus close. This one I think is the closest that I've yet discovered. It goes to 20 centimeters, and I think possibly around a little less, probably around about 17, 18 centimeters, because it does turn a little past the 0.2 mark. This is a lovely, lovely lens, but is it going on my maybe pile? Well, sadly, I don't think it is, because I don't think a 35mm lens would really suit me as my only lens. No doubt I'd get used to it. No doubt I'd be able to use it nicely within its limitations. But at 35mm, it's just a bit too wide for my photography and for what I want out of my photography. And that goes even more for the CZJ Flectagon 20mm f4. This is a really nice lens, and I've been sort of trying to restore it over the last few years. It came to me in a pretty bad way. I've now got it nice and clean. The front element is polished and clear of all its imperfections that it had when it came to me. It looked like it had been sprayed with a, I don't know, a shot blaster or something. It was in very poor condition. So it's in relatively nice order now, although I think I've taken the coating off the front to some extent. But there we are. It's better than a scratched up front element. But again, it's just too wide for my style of photography and what I need. So that is the lot. That is my consideration of the lenses, and it remains only for me to pick a winner. So what have we got on the short list? The short list that came from the original short list. Well, we've got the Helios 44. Is this the lens I would choose to use if I could only use one lens? Well, the answer is no. It's not quite fast enough. I would like just a little more speed on this lens. It's f2 and that's fine, you know, there's no problem with f2, but if I'm only going to use one lens, I would like it to be a little faster than this one. It's got many good qualities, it's got reach, it's got great image, but it's just not quite fast enough. The Leica Summitar f2 50mm. Is that going to be the winner and the lens that I would use if I could only use one lens? Well, I'd be perfectly happy to use this as my only lens. It's a very, very nice. It's beautiful images. It gives beautiful images. It's got swirl. But it's a little short at 50mm, and that 1 meter minimum focus distance, or 3 feet, is just a little too long for the kind of photography I like to do. I do like to be able to get a little closer if I can, and even to do something resembling close-up photography, and this is not the lens to do it with. So although it's beautiful, it looks beautiful, it makes fantastic images, and it's a really, really nice lens in good order. Although I would be happy to use it as my only lens if I had to, this is not the one I would select out of choice. The Minolta PF, Rockor, Auto Rockor even, 58mm f1.4. Would this be the lens that I would use every day and permanently if this was my only lens? Well, this lens has many fine qualities. It's got fantastic colour. It shoots down to a reasonable 60 centimeters minimum focus distance. It's a 58, so it's got a little bit more reach. Is this the lens that I would use if I could only use one? No, it isn't. And the reason is that it's not quite fast enough. I would like a little more speed if possible. And I think you can see where we're going now with this one. So for that reason, this is not the lens that I would choose to use if I could only use one, although I would be entirely happy just to use this lens. It's a very, very nice lens, but given the choice, it would not be the one. So what else is on the short list? Well, there are two more on the short list. One of them is the Zeiss Pancolar 50mm f1.8. Would this be the lens that I would use if I could only use one? No, it wouldn't. And the reason is it's not quite fast enough. I would like a little bit more speed, and it's a little bit short at 50mm. So although I love this lens and I would be entirely happy to shoot this one alone if I could only shoot one lens, this would not be the one I would select out of choice. So that leaves us with the winner, which is the Olympus 55mm f1.2. This one I have chosen for several reasons. Firstly, it's got the speed. It's got wide open, a very, very interesting image. Technically not a perfect image, it's a little bit soft, but it does have that incredible background blur that's, you know, you don't know what it's going to do. It's going to give you all sorts of kooky effects, and that's great for portraits and certain other shots that you might want to make. And if you want to tighten it up, all you need to do is move the dial, aperture dial to f2, or if you're not too concerned about your blur, f2.8, and at those settings it really sharpens up and it becomes a very, very nice lens indeed. It's got a reasonable minimum focus distance of 45 centimeters. That's a little bit of a compromise. I would have wanted it ideally to go a bit closer, but you know, you can't have everything. And as I say, it's got that bit of reach as a 55mm lens. So this is the lens that I would use if I could only use one lens. So there we are. That is my choice. How about you? Which lens would you use if you could only use one lens? Let me know in the comments box below. I would be very interested to hear about it and get a conversation and discussion going. That would be nice. So I think that is it from me for today. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Many thanks for dropping in and checking out the video. I hope it's been of some use. I hope it's been enjoyable. Many thanks to subscribers. Thank you very much for your support, and many thanks also go to patrons. Thank you for your support. Thanks to anybody who's given super thanks, just tuned in to watch the channel, made a comment, anybody who's engaged with the channel, many thanks to you also. But as for me, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and if you're not doing anything too bothersome, troubling or difficult next week at around this time, please do tune in for a spot more Zenography. Cheerio all.